This is episode 6. Welcome back to Gaming at the Round Table with Owl Knights Media. We've got Crystal, Jojo, and myself, Maverick, today, and we're going to talk probably too much. So hopefully the recording's working, and we've got a little image pulled up. I think, Joe, you're leading this, but it looks like a results on the browser for hardest video games ever, according to the World Wide Web.
Based on our extensive research on Google, I came up with this list to just kind of work off of. But I had mentioned in the previous podcast that how hard is too hard in gaming and how it plays into just games in general. Like, I've played some games, and I'll use one that's on this list, which is Bloodborne. My wife to this day will not allow that game in my house because I think we had just started dating when that came out, and I was playing instant rage, just rage. Like some of the games on this, I was actually surprised. Cuphead, I heard was very hard, but I never got to play myself. There's a couple else on this list that I haven't heard of, but some of them are a little bit old school, which I was actually surprised, and I wanted to
Yeah,
point it
you know
out to
what's
you that
funny?
Mega
When
Man's
you
on that
first
list.
brought up this list and I saw Cuphead really up there, I remember I didn't even notice Mega Man, but I remember thinking clearly this has a huge differential between what type of game, because I saw Dark Souls and I was like, that should be at the top. It should just be all the way up there. And Cuphead, I remember thinking I've played a lot of very difficult games that function like Cuphead, where they're either mash bullet hells, I think is what they're called, or they're Castlevania like, or they're Mega Man like. And between that combination, I've enjoyed a lot of them, really hard ones. But I absolutely hated Dark Souls. So you mentioned Mega Man on here, and I don't think Mega Man's that hard, but what makes a game hard? Mega Man was out in an era in which you couldn't save. Right? So like, oh,
I
it's
think
not
that's
that
why.
hard, except, well, can you beat the game?
in
Well,
one sitting.
I can on a virtual thing where I can save. Yeah.
Because I mean, I remember playing Mario,
Oh
and
yeah.
there were certain
Yeah.
levels where we just got stuck, or like certain bosses. I'm trying to remember which one of the Bowser's it was. Was it the Sun one, or but one of them? Like it didn't matter what we did. Like we got stuck on this thing, and it took forever to get past it. But Mario would allow you to get to a point and then
Mm,
unlock like a world or like a pin, so you could continue on. But you'd be
yeah.
stuck at that pin if you couldn't beat it. I remember Tekken was another one, and that's a fighting game where if you played at a certain difficulty, and I think the newer fighting games, like I can't play.
There's
Is it Street Fighter? I don't know if it's the mechanics, but I
mm,
cannot play the newer fighting games, and I'm pretty sure it's Street
they
Fighter.
definitely changed
For whatever
something, and
reason,
it
I can't.
was a noticeable change. I can't say exactly which game because I don't follow fighting games that hard, but I definitely remember feeling the difference in fighting games generically. I want to say in, the 2010s especially, is there was this transition from what it felt like on the PlayStation to, I think, basically when they started going to 3D models, like as the de facto, the controls just felt different, and it was so hard to just do combos, let alone survive against people that knew what they were doing.
I think Dark Souls, because I played Bloodborne and I'd never played Dark Souls. And I remember hearing and seeing
Yeah.
the hype around one of the Dark Souls that was coming out. And I was interested in it because I was like, oh, this seems like a pretty big game. Whatever. And then I saw like a game trailer or something, and I saw how similar it was to Bloodborne. And instantly it went, no, 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 not happening. And I'm just trying to think of other games where it was just like it was so ridiculously hard to progress in the game where
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't enjoyable. And I think that's the question that I have is that just for general purposes, what makes like it too hard? I understand there's games where like you can't save, you have to keep going at it, or you have to figure
Mm-hmm.
out like what strategy can beat a boss. But it's not so blatantly hard that you can't ever beat it. But what's the point where you break? Is it just hey, figure this out,
You
or
touched on an
you're
interesting
never meant to
topic
figure this
because
out.
I don't think it's exclusively in the realm of is it too hard to beat? Because when Crystal and I played Dark Souls, we were making progress. Granted, it was very slow going, but it was progress. And I really truly believe and felt at the time that we could keep going. I think I even said something to her like, oh, we could definitely do this. And I don't want to. I just don't. I don't want to.
Because like I beat Bloodborne, but I told myself like because I had to beat it. Like it was making me that angry. But the initial like shock of I can't kill anything, and it's the rinse and repeat of go back out,
Well,
you're
question for
gonna
you then.
die. Go back out,
You
you're
beat
gonna
that
die.
game. Do you now feel that it is too difficult?
I think it was to the point where it wasn't enjoyable. And again, I understand like you want a game to challenge you because otherwise you're bored. And I've had that happen where I've played a game, and it happens to me a lot when I play open world games. I have nothing against open world games, and I think they're fun to play, but I can only play them in doses because I will literally start to fall asleep because my I feel like my brain's not engaged enough at a high enough pace, and that's probably just to me as an individual because it was the same with me with like sports. I played baseball when I was younger, but as I started playing sports like football, lacrosse, wrestling, where it was intense the entire time you were playing it, those sports felt boring to me. So people are like, "Oh, do you watch baseball?" And I'm like, again, it's not knocking baseball. Like it takes an immense amount of skill to play baseball, but it is boring to me. It's like golf. Like everybody quiet.
Oh, how exciting.
Watch the ball. Like tennis, I
Mm.
can watch because again, it's a high enough pace, but it also gets redundant where it's like
In which case, there's
unless
sound
it's a
effects.
really good match, like
Yeah.
between yeah, I mean like it sounds like they're in a duel and it's like you're watching tennis. But again, it's certain games aren't like that. I guess the pacing's so slow that my brain is like, and again, this is as casual gamers where we work like full time jobs, and then you come home after working your whole shift, and you sit down to kind of unwind, and you're playing, and you're just, and you nod off, and then you realize your character's like 20 feet to the
Definitely
left,
a
like
balance
walking
to
into
be
a
had
wall.
between I want to be engaged when I'm already tired, but I don't want to be overly stimulated or frustrated, really. And I think that's the key thing. You mentioned this being like, well, is it too hard? And you answered with, it wasn't fun, or it wasn't fun anymore. And I think that's a really good definition of is it too hard? Because everyone likes different difficulties. So for me, I've played a lot of games where there's just impossible modes, and I don't play them on it. A lot of RPGs have tiered difficulties where they'll give the enemies plus 100% more health, plus 75% more damage, plus 30% more enemies outright. And I generally don't play those modes because they're just going to be frustrating, and I can't focus on the fun because you do need that balance of progress to time investment. And I'll bet there's a graph we could make if we were really into mathematics, and none of us are, where you could like watch this linear curve between level of effort and time to reward. And if your level of effort and time to reward get too off, like if the time it takes isn't I'm losing myself in this metaphor because I was thinking of graphs. But basically, if something takes too long to give you a sense of reward or accomplishment, it doesn't matter if it's actually fairly easy. You could do something that's really easy, but if it takes you an hour to accomplish something in the game, well, that's why I hate Monopoly. I hate Monopoly. I hate it with a passion. Every time I go to a family event or a friend's gathering, they're like, "You want to play board games?" And I'm like, "Absolutely not. I would rather sit here and stare at you than play Monopoly." Uh, Sorry, I'm getting worked up. But the idea there is very simple, right? I don't think it's strictly about sheer difficulty to what you were saying, right? And you responded accordingly. Crystal, give us some input here.
Well, I mean, as far as what you were saying about putting time into a game and putting hours in and then, feeling rewarded later on, if you will, I play a lot of games like that. So that's my cup of tea.
Well, even then,
um,
well, let's go with an example. I'm imagining that you're thinking of something like Stardew Valley or Minecraft.
yes, but I'm also thinking of stuff like Final Fantasy XIV, where I put in hundreds of hours to do end game content, raid, be in the top, what, 2%. Like, um,
But the difficulty correlation is,
mm,
I think, the bigger point in it. Because again, you can play those games for hours on end, but I don't know that the difficulty is that much of a marker in what you're doing.
would you say, Maverick, that the raid was difficult?
Rating is absolutely difficult in MMOs, and it is designed to be difficult. Uh,
Mm.
there,
Now, it's not, what is that game? Dead Souls?
you know, I,
Dark
I
Souls.
would wager that some of it
Dark
is,
Souls
but
or
it's
both?
not designed to be
Yeah.
entirely so, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes MMO is a broad topic, but usually when you talk about end game rating, it's there as a sliver of the available options for player bases, right? I won't name
Yeah.
names, but you and I both know multiple people in a Discord that have been playing 14 for many years. That right now there's a good percent chance they're on there just crafting something,
Oh, for sure.
or decorating their in-game house, or doing all
Yeah.
these other available options. And so I think that gets back to this notion of there's some sort of dynamic between like three-ish things, right? How physically difficult is this to do, whether it's reaction based or whatever, right? Then there's the how much time between rewards of some kind. And then there's the how many times can you do whatever the main game loop is
Hmm.
before it's either too redundant or it's no longer engaging, what Joe mentioned earlier, right? So you have to have that
Yeah.
balance between difficulty, which is not the same as engagement, and how long before you get some kind of reward. So, like, even with rating progression, uh, when you lost, oftentimes, if you kept staying in that 2 hour lockout window, 10 minutes in, 15 minutes in, you made a little bit of progress. You didn't beat the
Yeah.
fight. You knew you didn't beat the fight. But what kept you coming back is that, okay, I saw a new mechanic. Did anyone see what happened there? There was this giant circle, and then I was dead. It was like, yeah, don't stand in it. Right. But the idea is you saw
Yeah.
new mechanics, you started to try to adapt. And even if you failed
Mm.
over and over, it was that, okay, I got another chance. I can do this and get a little bit further. And the team as a whole would get a little bit further. And there was that dynamic of reward, even though it wasn't like a tangible reward.
Yeah. I also think that's a point too in what made that more difficult than, say, I keep forgetting the name of the game because I hate it so much. Dark Souls, right?
Yeah.
That game. In, end game rating, you're not it's not difficult because of you. It's difficult because of you're relying on seven other people to all work at the same time to do this end game boss. Whereas Dark Souls, it's like, oh no, I died. Animation lock.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So, I don't know.
I thought of an example while you guys were
Mm.
mentioning that. It's that Destiny. So when Destiny first came out, they had a good cycle of things to do, but what they didn't have was a partying system. So you guys mentioned raids and things like that. Whereas in Destiny, you unless you knew four or five people that were currently playing the game and could invite them to you, there was no way for you to as a single player beat those bosses or raids or whatever it was. which I think that pushed off a lot of their player base because again, they could only do a certain amount of the game without relying on other people. And that's something that I personally struggle with certain games is that if I can't progress as a single player, it frustrates me and then I lose interest in it. And I do like playing games with other people, but being forced to play with other people, I think is another factor in as far as difficulty. Because again, if we could party up, there's three of us, we could figure out a strategy, put our minds together and figure it out. But if it is literally impossible for me to do it on my own, that's another thing that could you compare that as it's a hard game because of that, or it's just a hard mechanic? So how would you guys relate that in like some of the games that you played where it feels like it's a mechanic or the game itself is actually
Well, I
hard?
actually have a recent game that I can compare this to, Helldivers 2. There was a very specific mission where you had to protect civilians.
Oh yeah.
And Maverick and I tried to do it together, and we failed. So that's two people trying to do it, and the most you could have in your party is four. And when I did it with other people, it was even more difficult, but like achievable. Now I feel like depending on the game, right? It could scale too. So even though it's difficult for just you and you can't do it, which he and I couldn't in Helldivers 2, it's still going to be more difficult in a party. So it's like the balancing system. I don't know.
So that would be mechanical, I would say, is because there's a mechanical reason that even in a group it becomes mechanically possible because you can factor in
yeah.
a buff or something like that. Because I think Diablo, I think in one of the things that they were good at is that they had different skill levels, but the skill level was what drawed you into further endgame because it would have you beat it on the lowest setting first, then go to the next setting. I believe it was like nightmare mode and things like that. And then they have their end all be all mode, which, like Mav mentioned, like we just don't touch. But again, the base play, I think it was three different modes. I can't like specifically remember, but again, those three modes were what caused you or made
like,
you want to play the game again. Especially in the older Diablos where you'd beat it on normal mode, then nightmare mode, and then hell mode, and then there was like I think 6 or 7 different hell modes. And then you wanted to get better gear, you wanted to get because it would allow you to progress further into that. And I think that's a healthy difficulty or hard version where it made you want to keep playing. Whereas some of these other games, which we're going to keep going back to our favorite Dark Souls here, where it was just not enjoyable to where like you could beat it, like, but to get beat by the same boss 25 times just to be able to beat them because you need to die to progress your character. That's a
so
weird mechanic to me
go
that
ahead.
just didn't make sense.
You look like
Why
you.
do you think it is that we are so frustrated with the computers, but then we could play Apex Legends or Fortnite and get our butts whooped for hours and win like one game and be totally cool with that?
The way that like I play with a consistent group of people, and you brought up Apex, and Apex is a good example because to initially get into the game,
Yeah.
the learning curve is pretty high. Whereas like you use Fortnite, a 5-year-old could pick up a controller and kind of like figure it out and become decent. Whereas Apex, like there's not just the physical gameplay of it, but there's strategy to it. Now, when you play in a lobby that's considered to be close to where your skill level is, even if you're not necessarily winning the game, you can progress far enough into the fighting and then the end game of that battle
Yeah.
to where you feel like you accomplished something. So where you can reset and say, let's try it again. Now, if you just start getting like stomped off rip, where if you wind up in like a pred lobby or a masters lobby where these guys are just that much better than you, it's just not even like entertaining. And those are the nights where you play like 3 games and you're like,
Or
I'm getting off,
you just keep
or
playing
something in
because
my
you
house is
hate
breaking.
yourself, which is usually what I do. Because for me, it's just my randoms.
I mean, some people are masochists. They
Yeah,
they
masochism
enjoy the
aside, I
torment
think
of it.
the original point that you actually asked about, Crystal, was like, why are we okay with people stomping on us, and more so, or at least more often, than computers? And I think
Oh yeah,
there's that mental thing that somewhere in our deep, deep minds, we know that they made the game this difficult, right? For the average
mm.
consumer. When you get beaten by a human, there's always that, all right, they're better than me, right?
They're just cheating.
But
Leave them alone.
no. But the idea is that the next person you fight will likely not be Carmen San Diego, and she killed you, right? The next person you fight in that randomized lobby is not going to be that same lady, Carmen San Diego, right? It's going to be Bob the Builder or whoever, some Joe Smo. When you fight a computer and you get rolled, you know who you're going to fight the next time you try this. It's going to be the
Yeah.
same computer with the exact same difficulty. And so you know that it's not going to get easier or harder or whatever your frustration is with it. And so I think that's at least part of the reason why we're more okay with getting beaten in PvP oriented content,
Yeah.
especially if you have the option for PvE content, which most of the shooter games you don't these days. Um, oh, that is a discussion we should talk about as a group. Did you guys hear the news about? I want to say it was Overwatch was supposed to be developing PvE content, and then they got
Yeah,
they
it
released an
disappeared.
announcement saying, hey, it's not going to be quite what we hoped it was going to be. We'll have to implement it gradually, right? But we're still working on it. And then very recently I saw a video, I think I saw it today, where a streamer, very famous guy, was commenting that it's basically went from that to even worse, where they were like, we're just not doing PvE content. And I thought that was really fascinating, because the three of us have talked about, hey, back in the olden days,
Mm.
multiplayer was a game mode. It was not your game.
Yeah.
And it has come to fruition that notion is so bad that games that do multiplayer first person shooters, which used to be a game mode, struggle to even release anything remotely PvE related. And Overwatch has money, right? We're talking about Blizzard Activision. These they have developers. They have hundreds of developers from what I recall. So the notion that they just can't do it at all is just insane to me. I'm a developer, for the record. Uh, we know that other teams have done this, right? And so I think I wanted to mention it, and this was my excuse to mention it. So there you go.
Well, the one that hurts me is I know Apex was talking about how do we make our game last for 20 years or something like that.
Change.
And they were talking about adding more stuff, right? More beginner friendly stuff. And they just let go of like 200 people. So, I don't know what's happening with Respawn.
And I don't think it's just them. It's a few studios that are
The tech industry at
releasing people at a
large
pretty
is
high rate.
actually in a downsize, at least if you're following the news. Like every major tech company you could name off the top of your head has probably gone through a recent downsizing, from game companies to Silicon Valley, you know,
You
Tesla,
think that they're
everybody.
going to start turning to AI more?
They're going to try. They're definitely
Ugh.
going to try, for sure. And this is kind of a tech topic more than a gaming industry topic, but it does affect gaming, right? People are
Mm,
already trying their best to replace developers, which in turn will replace the people making the video games. And they're doing
yeah.
their best to make it AI driven. I think some of them are legitimate, like let's push the bounds of technology. Way to go, humanity, right? But a lot of them are just, hey, if I can get a computer to do this, I'm going to get a computer to do this. And we're not there yet, right? I still have a job, another job. We're not there. Now, will we ever get there? Probably, or at least way closer than we are now. But I don't see how any company is going to custom craft a huge AAA game with primarily AI software until such time as the developers making those games coordinate to make AI that can do the stuff that they do. And it's kind of like, uh, my father actually has a story he likes to tell from a commercial he saw where there's this worker ant and he's carrying poison down into a colony. And I guess part of the commercial, a reporter or something says, "Hey, why are you taking the poison down there? You know this is going to kill everybody." The ant's just like, I'm just paid to work, man. I'm just this is my job. Off I go." And it destroys the colony. And I feel like developers are in a weird position where if there's no way that we can make AI that can adequately create a good video game right now. And to get there, you need a developer or many developers to help AI get there,
Yeah.
which will, of course, implode their own job security and all that. So it's this weird dynamic.
I think a strong comparison for that is like the automotive industry, where a good amount of physically putting the car together is automated. We have robotic arms and things like that. I think in gaming as a whole, it's becoming problematic because these are like two, I can name two parts of gaming or game development that are being affected by AI.
Yeah.
One being the artistic portion of it, and the other being like I personally do photography, so that's become a major issue is that you can literally make a photo out of nothing, out of words. And it's comparable to actual photography photos. So to have that competing rolls back into again gaming where in gaming when we were kids and you have the I'm blanking on the name of it and it's embarrassing, but you're talking to the computer in the game. So you're trying to have a conversation and they give you like certain answers.
Oh,
And
like
you can only
dialogue
pick between
options.
like three different answers. Yeah, dialogue options. Whereas like AI can make that pretty interesting because you're playing a game and you want to have an individual like conversation and that part of gaming could actually be pretty cool. But then again, you're taking the artistic part of it, rolling back into that, where you have people that do concept art, things like that.
Yeah.
They now do that with AI. So it's not taking the whole game, but it's taking at least the initial starting of it and then wiping out
This is
actual
such
people
a
doing
broad
it.
topic, and there's a lot of things that I want to talk about on it too. So, where do you go? Um, there's several things I'd like to talk about. I'm just trying to tone it down. So, let's start with aspects in gaming. You mentioned a really awesome analogy, which was the automotive industry. A lot of the automotive industry is automated. Yet, I guarantee you, if you live in a municipality or larger, you can walk no greater than 20 blocks, and that's pushing it. And you will find a maintenance shop where everyone in there is a human being and they are
Yeah.
working to fix cars, right? And I think the gaming industries is really at this precipice of getting themselves in a dangerous place. And a lot of the AAA companies that are looking to cut costs are gonna implode because of this. They're going to find AI or tools that allow them to cut speed, like go super fast, make the game, it gets out there. And even before AI was a hot topic, we already had this huge problem with AAA games going out and not being finished, having bugs out the wazoo, like totally, in some cases, outright unplayable. Cyberpunk, right?
Oh yeah.
That was big deal. And that was before AI was the hot topic. Can you imagine how impossible it would be for a developer or a machine to fix a game that was made entirely or primarily by a machine because they thought they did it right in the first place. How are they going to troubleshoot new problems that have never existed? They made those problems, and a human needs to figure this out quickly because they're going to be expected. Well, just use AI to help you. And it's like, well, AI made this problem, so I'll do what I can. And I think they're going to get into that realization that there's a reason we have car mechanics left, right, and sideways. And it's not because we can't just manufacture cars very fast using 90% machines, maybe greater than 90%. I think the gaming industry is going to experience that in the extremely near future as more and more people push the bounds. And even with artistry, right? You mentioned that I think this is going to be a problem in the immediate future. And we're going to go through like a wave with it because AI is going to generate so much content that it's going to start self-consuming its own content for reference to make new content. And until we can make computers that think like people, they'll always be limited by their data set, right? So it seems like a massive amount, but every 10 years, humanity has discovered some new way to express themselves. And until we get truly creative AI, and I think that's a whole discussion in and of itself, we're going to go through this loop where AI is going to do everything. It's going to kill artists' career and all this stuff. There's going to be laws, but eventually people are going to look at something and go AI instantly, and they're going to be bored by it, even though it's magnificent looking to us.
It happened recently.
Yeah.
Like, I don't mean to cut you off, but like that specific point, it happened with a MCU TV show with I believe it was the Nick Fury show where
Really?
the intro of it was done with AI, and they tried to claim that that was the purpose of it because of the storyline on the show, but it made so many people mad that they even considered doing it, that it caused this whole uproar, and it affected their viewership on it. But I believe it was the Nick Fury show.
Yeah, I'll look it up later.
Double
but
check
I
on
didn't
Google.
know that any show had created an AI intro for a TV show. That's fascinating. And you know, we have strayed very far from our path of this day.
I mean, it's a conversation. It's a conversation. It's a good one.
It was Secret Invasion was the show,
Secret Invasion.
but it was based around Nick Fury. But yeah, the intro is done by AI.
Well, I'm definitely going to look into that. It's very interesting. And it's, you know, to tie these two topics together, can you guys imagine how beneficial it would be to have AI calculate all the difficulty changes necessary on an average server? So SBMM, or what do you guys whatever first person shooters use to calculate, you know, all that stuff, I think that that's an area where difficulty, the topic we started with, could be extremely helped by using AI that can analyze these data sets, see how fast people are dying on average, how many players are in the lobby versus, you know, random generated computers and all this other stuff. Take all that data and go, okay, if you're going to play the next game, I need to match you with this data set because all these other data sets aren't appropriate for your skill level. And I feel like that's an excellent use case that can make games, because in my opinion, I find first person shooters, after they've been out for like a year or more, very difficult if you are a new player to them. Extremely difficult.
Except Fortnite. Fortnite does a really good job of balancing. Like it's hard, if you will, but like I feel like even you, somebody who hasn't played battle royales before, were able to pick up Fortnite and keep up with a party in like a week and a half, 2 weeks.
So I think I disagree with you actually. And even though you were talking about me, I did training in their little shooting range. I did training in their computer made zone. I did training in player made maps. I purchased an augmentation on my controller to help me aim better. I was playing with a group of people that have played first person shooters, including that one, for years, plural. So I had a massive support system compared to people that don't. And I was still getting annihilated.
See, I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
but now do everything you just said and play Apex Legends.
Because they have the same systems in place
Mm.
where you can't even play the multiplayer portion without doing the tutorial. This is how you aim, so on and so forth. But even with that,
Mm.
I think the skill
Okay,
level
well, I
is just
agree with
night
you
and
that
day.
Fortnite's probably more friendly than Apex. But I think the point that I'm trying to make is that it's my opinion that long-standing first-person shooters are too difficult because because they're
I think Call of
populated
Duty is a
by
good example.
people, and those people get better over time. Unlike
Yeah.
computers, right? If you're playing a game that has a computer, you will get up to that level of that computer eventually.
The scary part is going up against kids.
Yeah.
Like your reaction time as an old person compared to these teenagers or even children, right? You just can't keep up with them.
You know what? That both of those comments just made me think of something. The difference between, I think, games now compared to, let's go back 10 years, 5 years, is the player
Oh
base
yeah.
is immensely different compared. Because the amount of people, especially after 2020, that currently play games, and this is including an older generation than us, that are actually skilled at games and get better at it, that I think is a big factor in why certain games are considerably harder to compete, especially in the ranked play of it, because the player base is a lot bigger. Whereas 5, 10 years ago, let's say Halo, for example, on average, they'd probably have anywhere between 10,000 upwards to 20,000 congruent players compared to like the player bases in these games now are 3 times that. So trying to like put you in a skill bracket, I think is where you were mentioning like AI could help that. I think that's a solid idea, but it could also backfire in a sense of they're going to look at an equation and say, okay, you fit into this bracket. Then you go to play people at that bracket. And again, instead of it being 1,000 players, it's 15,000 people at that skill bracket. So the best person in that bracket is probably the base of the next bracket up. So you're trying to compete and get better, but you're playing people at a bracket one up from you. And we can use their silver, bronze, gold, which is in most games now. If you're looking at these skill brackets and you look at the ratios of it, it's not balanced compared to, again, I think it's, again, what you guys were saying and the player amount.
Isn't
I
that
think
what
that
Apex
somehow
did
screws the
last
ratio.
season?
She said
like
AI is not going to do it any
They
worse
tried to
than
do something
Apex.
similar to it, but it.
Listen, I'm just thinking the way he was mentioning it because, it's like you're a bracket that it would put it in, right? I believe that's what Apex did last season, and people like I almost quit. I mean, you heard me talking. I didn't even play ranked last season because it was so bad.
It was
Between
bad.
the me playing against predators and I'm in, I think, what was it, bronze? And then having to do quests or whatever, like it was just, the whole thing was bad. But my whole point is that Apex had made it to where instead of being, okay, I'm in bronze, I'm going up against people who are in bronze, it was you're going up against people who are, say your skill level is 3, you're in between 3 and 5. But those level 5s are the difference between like a new player and an intermediate player.
Yeah, what you're saying sounds really similar to what Joe was just saying in terms of the range. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's less obvious when you have thousands of people and all that.
Mm-hmm.
I think innately some of the problem with why first person shooters especially are hard games, even if they're mechanically simple, is because again the human factor means that the humans that continue playing get better, and the new players, the young players, obviously learn faster, have better reflexes. But I would go a step further. In you talked about last 5-10 years, the access to information and the acceptance by society, both, right? The internet was obviously a really big thing 8 years ago, but I would wager that right now is the most um, commonly accepted time in history to be a gamer or to be gaming, period. And Joe mentioned 2020, right? When everyone was locked inside, whether they wanted to be or not, people who didn't think that gaming was healthy or even entertaining, right? A lot of those people at least knew people that were doing it, if not outright trying it themselves. I used to worry about getting beat up for watching anime or playing video games when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And now people outright get excited. I remember walking through a Barnes and Noble and seeing a group of cool looking teenagers go by me, and the things coming out of their mouths were the nerdiest, geekiest stuff. They were like, "Yeah, we got D&D later tonight. It's my wizard's gonna do X, Y, Z." I'm like, "Oh my god, I would have had my glasses broken as a kid over that." And so, how does that relate to what I'm saying? The internet, so the access to the information and just the social acceptance of gaming in general
Mm-hmm.
is making it so that a 10-year-old will realistically try out a game and get really good at it really fast because his friends aren't going to ostracize him. It's something that everybody's doing. And yeah.
On that note, something I'm not going to bring it up 100% this time, but something I'd like to talk about next time is the availability of cheats. So, like a strike pack or a gaming chair,
So
as people would call it.
I will concede I definitely used a Game Shark when I was a kid. But for anyone that doesn't know what a Game Shark is, it is not the same as using a cheat in a PvP oriented game. They were
No.
things like go from level 1 to level 90 in an RPG, or unlock
It
a
was
character that
PvE.
right, exactly, at least
Yeah.
almost all of them.
Grand Theft Auto was a big one that had that,
Right.
where you'd put in a cheat code for like a rocket launcher or a Superman ability where you could fly around. But when games started progressing, you got achievements,
Oh yeah.
which I think a lot of people were into, and they're still into. You're trying to get like a platinum like little thing or get all the achievements unlocked, because that was a big thing when I was like younger playing games. Was you wanted to get a certain amount of achievements
Mm.
and get the full everything unlocked. That was the whole point of doing side quests. All that was to get the achievements. So if you put in a cheat code, you couldn't unlock it. But again, it didn't
Yeah.
affect how you played against other people. Now I think a lot of like what you mentioned, which is, this is going to be a rabbit hole we should probably save, is that it affects it
Mhm.
negatively on
People's
a high level.
to re-bring up the whole difference in generation. Parents would routinely say, "Why are you playing video games? You'll never make any money. You need to go learn something useful." And you wait 20 years or whatever it was, like, "Oh, they're making money on that. You were good at that. You could have done that, right?" And that's not just an us thing. I've seen that play out countless times. You'll find articles left, right, and sideways on Reddit with that kind of commentary. Is that gaming is not only legitimized now, it is, if you are genuinely talented or skilled, you're going to actually be able to make money. Or even if you don't win tournaments, well, now we have streaming services, we have podcasts, we have all these other things where you can gain a following and generate real income or drive traffic to whatever your real income is, to where, you know, when people cheat, the stakes are so much higher. It's no longer Bob's Bob's a not great guy because every time he comes over and we play, he cheats, right? Like, okay, exactly, right? You go,
You're
hey,
looking at my
stop that.
screen.
And brothers would do
Oh,
that.
I remember that. When you would have to hide your screen from your sibling.
I'm not looking.
Yeah.
I'm
Or
not
you'd have
looking.
to put something to divide.
I'm not.
Liar, how'd you know where I was?
Yeah.
I
You
remember that
original
on
wall
Halo
hack.
specifically.
Halo,
Yeah, but even
was,
if you did,
got
right? That's my
chewed if you
point.
tried that.
Let's say you did. You get ostracized, life goes on. What did you really affect? Like, people got upset and then that was the end of that evening. Now,
Yeah.
like, you're cheating. Oh, Joe, you were just telling me how someone, or it might have been Crystal, one of you two. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just happened in a recent tournament. And there was, I think, $25,000 on the line. And 2 players got hacked, exposing like a loophole during the tournament, and gave them, one of them got wall hacks and the other one got aimbot. So like he could be shooting to the left,
Yeah.
and his bullet will hit somebody to his right.
And
Like
it's
the bullet
really
will literally
wildly
go hunt
unfortunate because
somebody
no matter
down.
what happens, even if they prove that, hey, I didn't intend to do this, right? And there's no like negative, it restarts the match. They're not going to go, okay, well, just, see how this one
But
goes, right?
it didn't just get restarted, it got delayed. They still haven't redone it yet.
Yeah. Because now they
They
have to
wiped the
figure out the
whole.
security vulnerability and all this other stuff. So it's a lot of
Good.
time, it's a lot of money. But
It's about time.
I would go out on a branch and say it is possible that whoever was going to legitimately win that tournament might not be the same person that now wins the tournament. And it has nothing to do with them changing their skill, right? But it's, you go into battle and you win your fight, and you could fight someone that's worse than you 100 times. And it is possible that one of those times they kill you just by happenstance, right? And so that's what's devastating about that tournament in particular.
Yeah, well, on that note too, the loot pool is going to be entirely different, so they probably won't even see the same guns.
Yeah.
So
I actually want to write that down so we don't forget it. You mentioned cheating and its impact, right? Because obviously we've got stuff to say. And impact. We'll save that for later. But cheating and difficulty of games is an interesting intersection too. Because I definitely cheated with I don't know, cheated with a video game. I cheated while playing video games when I was young, especially single player RPGs, because
I still do.
Exactly. There's so much that it's just, and it's not because it's too difficult. It oftentimes.
Clarification: I do not cheat on Apex.
Okay. Yeah.
Just look at my stats. You'll know that. Mods on Stardew, okay?
Right. And that's my point, is that difficulty and cheating, I don't think are a one-to-one relationship. You would think they might be, right? If it's really hard, of course you're going to cheat. But in my experience, at least when I cheat, it's to save myself time, like lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming it's the same. Well, I know it's the same with Stardew Valley.
Yeah.
That happened with Skyrim, for an example, that the game got modded to such a level that even the game developers started adding
like
in the mods as like a DLC. Yeah, so when you got like a later version of the game, you could play those different mods.
Concerned Ape, the creator of Stardew Valley, he actually added to where people can mod his game easier. Baldur's Gate.
Minecraft, I think, did the same thing.
See, that's why it's so amazing.
But I think that's different. Like modding a game,
depends.
Do you consider
on
modding
what
cheating?
What you're modding, right? So, like in Stardew, I have there's this place called the Skull Cavern. Every time you go in there, it resets. So, like you're going down floors. say I go down to floor 100, well, I'm going to go to sleep that night. It's going to reset me back to 0. That's cheating. I put an elevator. Why does that word sound wrong? Elevator?
Lift.
A lift. In.
Mm-hmm.
And
Same
so
thing.
now I'm cheating to go up and down so I don't have to constantly work my way down. It's just saving myself time. But
I think mods are cheating, and the argument could be made where, oh, this mod literally just makes the characters naked or something, and it's like, all right, fine, but most people, when they're modding, they're going to mod for convenience.
well, because like I also have Stardew. Oh yeah. Actually,
A
let's
topic for
combine
another
that.
day.
Because that is actually part of the cheating. So we'll do cheating
Fair
and
enough.
mods in our next conversation,
Cheating
since
and
we are.
mods.
I think we're basically at time, aren't we?
I think we are, especially because I haven't been watching at the time. So yeah, we're definitely there.
We are.
I'm glad you guys mentioned
We're there.
the cheating and mods, because what I wrote down previously was impact and impact. So that wasn't. I was working too quickly.
What?
That just shows we've been in this conversation for a while, so your brain is like hitting the back end
this
of
has
it.
been Gaming at the Round Table, episode 6 with Owl Knights Media. Thank you guys for listening. Look forward to talking to you soon.